my gosh. How many would like to preach on that passage? This is one of those passages where, I looked at it and I thought, let's see how tough you are, John. Let's see if you learned anything in school. Okay. So, Paul, in the middle of this, in the middle of this thing about circumcision, crucify, corruption, cross, Christ, it's kind of like 8 C's in here. In the middle of this, he says, see with what large letters I'm writing this to you. Well, he didn't write his letters, he dictated them. And so that he is saying, see with what large letters I'm writing this should get their attention. He's writing now, he has stepped in, he is saying, and I'm doing this with large letters. I want you to see this. I want you to know what I'm telling you is really, really important. I mean, it's like that bulk mailing we get periodically where it says, important, open immediately. Yeah. Okay, and then it's, your 18th insurance ad or something. But that's what he's doing here. Large letters, open immediately, read immediately. This is important for you. So, what is so important about what Deborah read? Okay. He never uses the word in this passage, but the whole passage is about justification, and because the whole letter to the Galatians is about justification. Justification is if we feel justified, we feel like we fit in, like we belong, like we count, like we matter, like we're worth something. If we feel justified, we tend to have peace in our lives. We tend to feel contented. We tend to feel like our life is centered, like it's grounded, like it's on a solid foundation. It's very hard to get through life without feeling justified by something or by someone. Justification says we fit in. Descartes, described a person as, I think, therefore I am. Well, that's a statement of justification. I think, therefore I am. If I don't think, I'm not. And we can justify ourselves in a lot of ways, and different people justify themselves in different ways. I think, therefore I am. I have intellect. For some people, that's what defines their life. Others, I have, therefore I am. I have a house, therefore I am. I have a job, therefore I am. What justifies us? Gosh, it could be race, it could be nationality, it could be gender, it could be gender orientation, it could be religion, it could be our political parties, could be our nationality, could be our IQ, it could be our morality, it could be our talent, it could be our looks, it could be our fitness. I'm in shape, therefore I am. There are all kinds of things that justify us. And I think when it comes down to it, what justifies us is what we worship. I think, therefore I am. I worship intellect. A person who would say, no, I have, therefore I am, wouldn't worship intellect. They worship possessions, or they worship their income. And so what justifies us tends to define us. And again, woe to the person without justification or without a solid justification. Now, I am rather slippery in my justification. I remember in high school, I realized, I never called it justification, but I realized that's what I was doing. I would think I was very smart until somebody came along and got a better grade on a test. And then I was without justification. Except, I could run a pretty good 2-mile. So I would compare myself to that person who got a better grade, and I'd say, well, they can't run a 2-mile as fast as I am. I do. So therefore, I'm justified because I'm the fastest 2-miler with the highest grades in this class. And then I'd run into somebody who was faster and smarter than me. And then I'd say, I'm without justification. My life's falling apart. My girlfriend's cute. I'm the only person in this class now with a cute girlfriend who runs a good 2-mile and has good grades. And I'm very, very slippery on what justifies me. Justification can become very competitive, where I do have to be better than the other person, or as good as the other person. And if I'm not, I lose my justification. Justification is often what we boast about. It's what we talk about. You know, the person who talks about their kids all the time or their grandchildren all the time is a person who finds justification in their children or grandchildren. Boasting, as Paul talks about it, might sound like bragging, but it is what we talk about. You know, if I talk about my job all the time or how busy I am all the time, that's what justifies me. Just listen to what you talk about. That's probably your justification, or what you want to justify you. Now, I find this justification thing to be rather insidious. Somebody told me this week that they really like to hear stories where I'm the loser. Okay. They said, oh, we can identify with your loser stories. That's what they said. There's this person that kind of gets under my skin because this person has to be the center of attention. There's always a lot of drama wherever this person is. And it kind of annoys me then because when there's all this drama, this person gets all the attention. And I think, why are people paying attention to this person? Why aren't they paying attention to me? And I think, don't they understand that I'm the one truly worthy of attention? Don't they understand that the only reason I'm not calling attention to myself is because I'm so humble? You know, and if they knew how humble I truly am, they would be praising me and they would be flocking to me. So I am really proud of my humility. Oh, none of you ever think that way. There was a town in Switzerland that every year awarded a medal to the most humble citizen in the town. And one year they awarded it to this man, and the next day they took it away from him because he wore it. But I realize how this, I can justify myself by my humility, and then I'll boast about my humility. It's so insidious. I can even boast, this is great, about my self-denial and how good I am at self-denial. And look how much better I am than you at my self-denial, which is calling attention to myself. What I find is so often with justification, at least in my life, is that it is very self-centered. It is about me. It is about my grades, about my family, about my income, about my career, about my school, about my team. It's all about me. And I become very fearful of losing my justification. And often when I get angry, it really is about losing that foundation, that center. So I find that justification can drive me nuts. It can drive me up a wall, either fear of losing it or competing with the other person. And I am very far from having peace and contentment. So now, we're kind of ready to talk about what Paul's talking about in all this talk about crucifying oneself and crucifying oneself with Christ and so on. What a person would say to me when they discover what a mess I am, where I'm competing with people in terms of humility and competing in terms of people in terms of self-denial and all that, they would say to me, John, get over yourself. Get over yourself. You're driving yourself nuts. John, decenter yourself. Quit centering your life on whether or not your team wins or loses. Quit centering yourself on comparing yourself to the other person. John, get over yourself and decenter yourself. Now, Paul would never use those words. What Paul would say is, John, crucify yourself. Die to those things that justify yourself, that don't work. Die to those things that are so self-centered that drive you crazy. So when Paul says, I have crucified myself to the world, and the world is crucified to me, he's saying, I have decentered my life. It no longer revolves around me. And then he goes on to say, that's not good enough to decenter yourself and to die to those things, because then you got nothing. He says you must crucify yourself with Christ. Recenter yourself and focus on Christ, not yourself. Let Christ be the one who justifies you. Let Christ become the center and foundation of your life. Focus on Christ. And he says, when you recenter your life, then you become a new creation. You become a person who's fully alive and fully mature. Christ says this in a variety of ways. Those who lose their life for my sake will find it. And we know that's true in our own lives. When I focus on myself, I'm not very content, I'm not very happy. When I focus on the other person and loving the other person and not worrying about what I get out of it, I find joy and I find peace. When I focus on a project and lose myself in a project, which is another way of saying be decentered, when I lose myself in a project, that's when I really find myself. And I find contentment and I find serenity. When we lose our life in another person, we're not less, we're more. Susan always likes to point out to me, and she has for the years of our marriage, that when a person truly falls in love, they don't become self-centered and all wrapped up in themselves. When they truly fall in love, they focus on the other person and become more joyful and happier and share that with other people. And that's what Paul's saying here. Be justified by focusing on Christ. Be justified by focusing on Christ's love and acceptance of us. That we belong because Christ loves us. Get wrapped up in that. And that starts to explain how Paul begins this passage by saying, basically, do good for the other person. Think of the other person. Provide hospitality for the other person. Forgive the other person. Be generous with your neighbor. Focus on that person, not on yourself. And you'll be centered, and you'll feel justified, and you'll experience the love of Christ. I write this with big letters. I write this with big letters. It's important. It's significant. I personally think the justification question in our lives is probably the central question in our lives. If we feel justified, we're at peace. If we don't feel justified, we're not. And Paul says, here's how you're justified. Focus not on yourself and what you get. Focus on what you're given by Christ and share it. And you will be at peace. May it be so. Amen.